She didn't reject you because she hated you. She rejected you because accepting you would have forced the entire family to face a truth they had spent years hiding. And now, after everything that happened, your soulmate sister has finally admitted that every cold look, every uncomfortable silence, and every attempt to keep you at a distance had a reason far more complicated than jealousy. The most painful part is that your soulmate never knew the full story. They believed their sister simply didn't approve of you, but what she finally confessed has completely changed the way they see the past. Listen carefully. Because this confession didn't happen during some ordinary family conversation. It came after your soulmate directly confronted their sister and asked one question she could no longer escape: why were you so determined to keep them out of this family? At first, she tried to avoid answering. She looked away. She claimed too much time had passed. She said reopening the past would only create more pain. But your soulmate refused to let it go, because too many pieces of your story had never made sense. Why did their sister become tense whenever your name was mentioned? Why did she repeatedly warn your soulmate that bringing you deeper into the family would change everything? Why did she seem afraid, not angry, whenever your relationship became serious? Then her voice broke. She admitted something your soulmate never expected to hear: I never wanted them accepted into this family. Those words landed hard. Your soulmate immediately asked why. Was it because she thought you weren't good enough? Was she protecting someone else? Did she simply dislike you from the beginning? But the sister shook her head and said, it wasn't hate. I knew what would happen if they became part of this family. I knew certain people would lose control of a secret they had been protecting for years. That sentence changed the atmosphere completely. Your soulmate stopped arguing and started listening. Their sister explained that long before you understood how serious your relationship would become, certain family members were already discussing you privately. Not because you had done anything wrong, but because your presence was beginning to expose cracks inside the family that everyone else had learned to ignore. You asked questions without realizing how dangerous those questions were. You noticed contradictions. You remembered details. And most importantly, your soulmate became different around you. They started questioning decisions they had always accepted. They became stronger. They started saying no. They stopped allowing relatives to decide what their future should look like. That terrified the people who were used to controlling them. Your soulmate sister admitted that she had been warned privately: if you became a permanent part of the family, old decisions would be questioned, uncomfortable truths would come out, and someone very close to them could lose the respect they had spent years protecting. She was told that keeping you at a distance was for the good of everyone. At the time, she believed it. She convinced herself she was protecting her sibling from family chaos. So she became colder toward you. She questioned your intentions. She made you feel unwelcome. And when your soulmate defended you, she pushed even harder. But there was one thing she never told your soulmate. Don't skip this part. Because this is where the confession became personal. Their sister admitted that one night, after a family disagreement involving you, she overheard a conversation she was never supposed to hear. Two relatives were discussing what would happen if you and your soulmate stayed together. One of them said something that haunted her for years: if those two stay together, eventually they're going to discover why we tried so hard to control this relationship. Your soulmate stared at her in disbelief. They asked, "Discover what?" And suddenly the sister became silent again. Because she had reached the part of the story she feared the most. She finally admitted that your relationship had never been the real problem. The real problem was what your relationship represented. With you beside them, your soulmate was becoming independent enough to challenge a family decision made years earlier, one decision connected to money, reputation, and a promise your soulmate never even knew had been made on their behalf. Their sister said she had spent years carrying guilt because she helped create distance between you without understanding the full damage it would cause. Then she whispered something that shattered your soulmate emotionally: "I thought separating you would protect this family. I didn't understand that losing them would destroy you." Your soulmate couldn't respond. Because suddenly they remembered every argument. Every moment when they had been pressured to question you. Every time someone said you were creating problems. Every time you were made to feel like an outsider when, in reality, your presence was simply making hidden things harder to hide. And for the first time, their sister admitted that she had watched your soulmate change after losing you. She watched them become quieter. She saw how family celebrations stopped feeling the same. She noticed how your name could still silence them years later. She saw them try to move forward while some part of them remained attached to the life they once imagined with you. And slowly, she began realizing that the person she had been told to protect her sibling from might actually have been the person who made them happiest. That realization has been eating away at her. But your soulmate still needed one answer. They looked directly at their sister and asked, "Who made you believe keeping them away was necessary?" This time, she didn't avoid the question. She gave them a name. And the moment your soulmate heard who it was, everything they believed about your separation began to collapse, because it was the last person they ever expected to have been involved. The name hit your soulmate harder than the confession itself, because this wasn't some distant relative or outsider trying to interfere. It was someone they had trusted for years. Someone whose advice they had accepted without question. Someone who had repeatedly positioned themselves as the calm, reasonable voice whenever your relationship became tense. Suddenly, your soulmate understood why certain arguments always seemed to begin the same way, why private conversations somehow became family discussions, and why every misunderstanding between you two seemed to grow larger before either of you had the chance to fix it. Their sister admitted that this person had carefully shaped the story around you, never attacking you openly at first, but constantly planting doubt. A small comment here. A warning there. A suggestion that you were changing your soulmate too much. A reminder that family should come first. Over time, those little comments became a wall between you. Your soulmate asked their sister how long this had been happening, and she struggled to answer because the truth went back much further than expected. She admitted that even before the family openly questioned your relationship, private conversations were already taking place behind closed doors. Your future was being discussed by people who never once asked what you wanted. Your intentions were being judged by people who barely knew you. And your soulmate was being told that choosing you could create consequences they weren't emotionally prepared to face. The sister said she believed those warnings because they were presented as protection, not manipulation. She thought she was helping prevent a family crisis. What she didn't realize was that the crisis had already been manufactured. Then your soulmate asked the question that made her break down completely. Did you ever know they truly loved me? She covered her face and admitted that yes, she knew. She had seen it. She remembered the way you looked at your soulmate when nobody else was paying attention. She remembered how you defended them without needing recognition. She remembered how you stayed through moments when walking away would have been easier. She even admitted that there were nights when she privately wondered whether the family was making a terrible mistake. But every time she started questioning what they were doing, she was reminded of the secret they were trying to protect. That secret was tied to an old family agreement. Years earlier, before your soulmate ever understood how much control certain relatives had over their future, an arrangement had been made involving property, inheritance, and family reputation. It wasn't a formal marriage arrangement, but it carried expectations about who your soulmate should eventually build a life with, what kind of family they should join, and which relationships would be considered acceptable. You didn't fit that plan. Not because there was something wrong with you, but because you represented something nobody could control. You represented choice. And choice was exactly what certain people were afraid of. The sister admitted that once your soulmate became serious about you, the old agreement suddenly became vulnerable. If your soulmate chose you openly, they might start asking why their future had been planned without them. They might discover conversations that had happened years earlier. They might refuse financial conditions they had never agreed to. Worse, they might expose someone who had benefited from keeping them obedient. That was why the pressure became stronger as your relationship became deeper. Your soulmate sat there in silence, realizing that what they had once believed was simple family disapproval had actually been something far more calculated. They remembered moments when you tried to tell them something felt wrong. You said certain reactions didn't match what was actually happening. You said people were judging you for things you never said. You said it felt like someone was making decisions about your relationship from the outside. At the time, your soulmate thought stress was making everything feel bigger than it was. Now they knew you had been seeing the truth before anyone else. Their sister began crying and said the words she had avoided for years, "You should have listened to them." That sentence carried years of regret. She admitted that after you disappeared from the center of the family's life, the secret didn't bring peace. It brought consequences. Your soulmate became emotionally distant. The family may have gotten what they wanted on the surface, but they lost something they never knew how to replace. The sister watched them smile without being happy. She watched them move through birthdays, holidays, dinners, and family events while quietly becoming someone more guarded. And every time another relationship failed to reach the same emotional depth, she knew why. Because you were never the problem. You were the person who exposed the problem. Then your soulmate asked whether the person behind everything ever regretted what they had done. The sister hesitated. She said regret wasn't the right word. Fear was closer. Because recently, something had changed. The old secret was no longer completely hidden. A document had resurfaced. One relative had started asking questions. Another person had refused to keep protecting the story. And the person who had worked hardest to keep you outside the family now believed there was a real possibility that your soulmate would finally learn everything. That was why the sister chose to confess now. She wasn't only trying to clear her conscience. She was warning your soulmate. Because according to her, someone had already started preparing another version of the story, one designed to make you look responsible all over again. But this time, your soulmate wasn't willing to believe it. They stood up, looked at their sister, and said, if they lied about them once, I'm not letting them do it again. Then the sister reached into her bag and pulled out something she had kept hidden for years. It was an old envelope. Your soulmate immediately recognized the handwriting on the front. Their own name was written there. And underneath it were 4 words that made their entire body go still. Give this to them only if the truth comes out. Your soulmate stared at that envelope for several seconds before touching it, because the handwriting belonged to the very person their sister had just named, the person who had spent years presenting themselves as a protector while quietly influencing nearly every major decision around your relationship. The sister admitted she had been given the envelope long ago with strict instructions never to open it and never to mention it unless certain family secrets began coming apart. She had obeyed because, at the time, she still believed silence was protecting everyone. But now she understood that silence had protected only the people who created the damage. When your soulmate finally opened the envelope, the first page didn't contain an apology. It contained dates, meetings, names, notes about private family discussions, details about conversations your soulmate had never been invited to. There were references to your relationship written in a cold, almost strategic way, as though 2 people's emotions had been reduced to a problem that needed to be managed. One note said that your influence was making your soulmate too independent. Another said that if the relationship continued, certain financial decisions could no longer be guaranteed. And one line made your soulmate's hands begin to shake. Distance must happen before they start asking the right questions. That sentence confirmed everything. The separation had not grown naturally out of misunderstanding. Someone had deliberately created conditions that made trust harder. They had encouraged certain relatives to confront your soulmate. They had repeated private comments out of context. They had made ordinary disagreements look like warning signs. Whenever you tried to defend yourself, your defense was described as disrespect. Whenever you stayed quiet, your silence was described as guilt. No matter what you did, someone was already prepared to turn it against you. Your soulmate looked at their sister and asked, "Why didn't anyone tell me?" She answered through tears, because every time someone tried, they were reminded what they could lose. That was when the real power behind the manipulation became clear. Some relatives were afraid of losing financial support. Others were afraid old personal secrets would be exposed. A few simply didn't want to be pushed out of the family circle. The person controlling the situation understood everyone's weakness and used it. Your soulmate's sister had been pressured differently. She had been told that if you became fully accepted, the family would split apart and your soulmate would blame her for not stopping it while she had the chance. She carried that fear for years until fear slowly turned into resentment toward you. But she admitted something even more painful. There had been one moment when she almost came to you directly. It happened after she accidentally heard your soulmate defending you during a private family argument. Your soulmate had said, "You keep telling me they're destroying this family, but every time I'm with them, I feel more like myself." The sister said those words stayed with her all night. For the first time, she wondered whether the family was not protecting your soulmate from you but protecting itself from what your soulmate was becoming because of you. She even drove toward where she believed she could find you. But before she reached you, she received a call. The caller knew exactly where she was going. That detail shocked your soulmate. How did they know? The sister said she never discovered the answer. She only remembered being told, "Do not make this worse. Turn around." And she did. For years, that decision haunted her. Your soulmate lowered their eyes because suddenly they could see how close the truth had come to reaching you. One conversation might have changed everything. One person choosing courage instead of fear might have prevented years of separation. But that chance had been lost. Then they continued reading. Near the bottom of the final page was something completely different from the rest of the notes. It wasn't another family instruction. It was a handwritten confession, apparently added much later. The words were less controlled, almost desperate. The writer admitted that the plan had gone further than originally intended. They claimed they never expected your soulmate to lose so much emotionally. They never expected you to disappear from the family's life completely. And they never expected the consequences to follow everyone for so long. But your soulmate didn't feel sympathy. They felt anger. Because regret after causing damage doesn't erase the choice to cause it. Then your soulmate found one final sentence: "If they ever find out, tell them there was one person who refused to participate." Your soulmate immediately looked up. "Who?" The sister didn't answer right away. Her face changed completely. Because this was someone your soulmate had believed stood against you from the very beginning. She finally whispered the name of an older family member who had always seemed distant, serious, and almost impossible to read. According to the sister, this person had secretly argued that you should be left alone. They had warned the family that interfering would create consequences nobody could control. They had even demanded that the manipulation stop before someone got permanently hurt. But nobody listened. And that older relative had kept something too. Not an envelope. Not another note. A recording. A recording of the meeting where the entire plan to push you away had first been discussed. Your soulmate sister said the recording still existed. And the person who had kept it had recently made one decision nobody in the family expected. They wanted your soulmate to hear it. But there was one condition. You had to hear it too. The moment your soulmate heard that condition, everything inside them shifted. Until then, this had been about discovering who interfered, who stayed silent, and why the family had worked so hard to keep you outside. But now the truth was no longer something they could hear alone. The older relative who had protected that recording wanted both of you present because, according to them, the damage had been done to both of you, and the truth belonged to both of you. Your soulmate sister admitted she had already spoken with that relative, and they had said something she would never forget. If we tell only half the truth to one person, we repeat the same mistake that started all of this. That sentence broke something open in your soulmate. For years, they had wondered whether they had imagined the pressure, whether they had failed you, whether the ending between you had simply been the result of bad timing and painful misunderstandings. Now they knew there had been hands on the scale. People had interfered. Fear had been planted. Conversations had been twisted. And the person they loved had been judged inside rooms they were never allowed to enter. Your soulmate sister looked at them and said, "There is something else you need to know before you hear that recording." Her voice was trembling again. She admitted that the older relative had not kept the recording for revenge. They had kept it because they believed one day someone would finally have the courage to correct what had been done. And that day had arrived because the family was beginning to fracture under the weight of its own secrets. People who once defended the old story were now blaming each other. Promises were being denied. Financial arrangements were being questioned. And the person who originally pushed hardest against you had started insisting that everyone should simply leave the past alone. But the past was no longer willing to stay buried. Your soulmate asked their sister whether she truly understood what her actions had cost. She didn't defend herself. She didn't ask for immediate forgiveness. She simply said, "I understand enough to know I can't undo it." Then she admitted the part that hurt her most. She had watched you leave believing you were unwanted, when the truth was that some of the family feared how deeply you were loved. They feared what your soulmate might choose if nobody interfered. They feared that love would become stronger than obligation. And instead of respecting that, they tried to control it. Your soulmate went silent for a long time. Then they said, "They probably think I chose all of you over them." The sister lowered her head, because she knew you probably did. And that realization became heavier than anything else in the room. Your soulmate started remembering the final days between you differently. The unanswered questions. The emotional distance. The way you stopped trying to defend yourself after realizing every explanation seemed to become another argument. They remembered moments when you looked at them like you were waiting for them to finally see what was happening. And now, years later, they finally could. Their sister said, "I saw how much they were hurting. I just didn't want to admit I was part of the reason." That confession didn't erase anything, but it was the first time she had stopped hiding behind the word family. Later that evening, your soulmate met the older relative who had kept the recording. There was no dramatic speech when they arrived. The older relative simply placed a small device on the table and said, "You deserve to hear what was decided without you." Then the recording began. At first, there were ordinary voices discussing the family's future. But gradually, your name entered the conversation. Someone questioned whether your relationship was becoming too serious. Another person said your soulmate needed to be redirected before they made a permanent decision. Then came the voice your soulmate recognized immediately, the same person their sister had named. That voice said, "If they choose this relationship freely, we lose the influence we have over what happens next." Your soulmate froze. There it was. No confusion. No misunderstanding. Control. Another voice asked what should be done. The answer was calm and calculated: make the relationship look unstable. Create enough doubt that your soulmate would begin questioning it themselves. Never force them openly because that might make them defend you harder. Instead, make separation feel like their own decision. Your soulmate couldn't believe how coldly it had been discussed. Then another voice entered the recording, the older relative sitting across from them now. "Stop this," they had said. "You're talking about two human beings like they're pieces on a board. If you interfere with something real, you may never be able to repair what you destroy." The room on the recording became tense. Someone laughed. Someone said they were being dramatic. Then the voice behind the plan replied, "They'll get over it." The recording ended shortly after that. Your soulmate didn't move. Because those 4 words explained years of pain. They'll get over it. But you didn't simply get over it. And neither did your soulmate. The older relative apologized for not coming forward sooner. They admitted they had been afraid of tearing the family apart. Your soulmate looked at them and said, "The family was already torn apart. We just pretended it wasn't." Then something happened nobody expected. Your soulmate's sister asked whether she could say something if you ever agreed to meet them again. Your soulmate looked at her carefully. She said, "I don't want to ask them to forgive me. I want to tell them the truth without making excuses." That was the first moment your soulmate believed her confession might be real. Not because she cried. Not because she regretted what happened. But because she finally stopped demanding that forgiveness come with the truth. Your soulmate then made a decision. They would not allow the family to contact you all at once. No pressure. No emotional ambush. No crowd of relatives suddenly trying to repair years of damage in one conversation. If you ever heard the recording, it would happen on your terms. If you wanted answers, you would get them. If you wanted distance, that would be respected too. Because after everything that had been taken out of your hands, your soulmate understood one thing clearly. This time, you deserved a choice. Before leaving, your soulmate turned to their sister and asked one final question. If you could go back, would you still try to keep them out of this family? She answered immediately, no. Then she paused and added, would have told this family that if accepting them meant we had to face the truth about ourselves, then maybe facing the truth was exactly what we needed. Your soulmate walked away carrying that sentence with them. Not as proof that everything could magically return to the way it was. Some wounds change people. Some years cannot be returned. Some trust must be rebuilt slowly, if it is ever rebuilt at all. But one thing had finally changed forever. You were no longer the person the family could quietly blame for everything that went wrong. The truth had shifted the weight back where it belonged. And the sister who once refused to accept you had now become the person telling everyone else that losing you had never protected the family. It had protected a lie. Your soulmate now knows you were not the threat. You were not the mistake. You were not the reason everything fell apart. You were the person whose presence made the truth impossible to hide. And somewhere deep inside, your soulmate is carrying a new regret, not simply that they lost you, but that when you needed them to trust what you were seeing, they trusted the voices around them instead. Now those voices have been exposed. The recording exists. The confession has been made. The family knows the story can never return to what it was. And your soulmate has only one question left. Not whether the family will finally accept you, but whether, after everything that happened, you would ever allow them close enough to tell you the truth themselves.